Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are from with an upcoming exhibit at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. Kate Kunow, curator of the museum, is with us, but also Susan Meyer and Dan Shogren from Minneapolis area are here because the exhibit that we're going to be talking about, Work and Society in the 1930s, is actually your own private collection. So first off, welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to have you all here. Dan, let me start with you. You have amassed a big enough collection that it's an exhibit at the museum. So you've obviously been collecting along this theme of work for some time. And so tell me how you got started.
So I think, maybe a good way to say our collecting, it's been a journey, Dennis. We didn't start in this place, but we've kind of gravitated to it, or I would say we happen to arrive at it today. Susan and I both were history, political science majors at the University of Minnesota, but we ended up moving into private industry for our careers. And so the fact that we worked in industry, we spent a lot of time in factories. I spent a lot of time in factories here in the state of Iowa as I worked. And just from starting doing contemporary art and, typically the kind of things you might buy on a vacation, as we became more sophisticated, spent time in museums, looked at art that we thought to ourselves, that looks pretty interesting. I wonder if we can acquire something like that for our own personal collection. And we found that, through gallery dealers and auctions and things like this, there was art, and we're like probably a lot of people. We had a budget to start with, so we started with less expensive things like prints, and we moved into photography. We also migrated into paintings, and again, we always did that with the same basic theme that kind of evolved or developed over the years. And that was sort of something that we did together. I mean, Susan had quite a bit of input in that also.
And the theme is the same as the exhibit. So a lot of your collecting, maybe all of your collecting, Susan, was surrounding this theme of work and working conditions and how people worked and how that affected their lives in society. How did you hone in on that as kind of the theme of the collection?
Well, like Dan said, the collecting is a journey, and as we collected, we narrowed down the focus. We actually initially started with some things that would be considered modern art, which is really not what we collect today. But as we narrowed down the focus, then we saw how interested we were in the 1930s and the fact that people worked and they dealt with hardship and they came out of it.
Kate, how did you first become aware of Dan and Susan's collection? Because they live in the Twin Cities, although you both did some work in Iowa in association with your careers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, gosh. We have been talking for at least 3 years. I think we started talking in either late 2019 or early 2020. I'd have to look back. But they reached out with this exhibition and their remarkable collection. And of course, the Cedar Rapids Museum has the biggest collection of Grant Wood in any public or private collection. The bulk of his career, of course, kind of centers on the 1930s. And so I was immediately in love with their collection because it really shows the America that Grant Wood doesn't cover, because all of his images from this time period are very bucolic and a little bit anachronistic. He still has people plowing with horses well into the mid-20th century. But their collection really deals with the Depression and the Dust Bowl and labor issues, both rural and urban. So I thought it really dovetailed beautifully with the collection that we have at the museum already and shows something that our collection of, around 8,000 pieces just can't. We don't have the photography in our collection. We don't have the paintings that really depict what was going on in America during that time. So I think it's a really fascinating look at a part of American history that we can't show with our collection. So I've just been thrilled to be able to work with them and choose pieces. Their collection is much larger than the exhibition that we have on view, even though that we have 59 pieces that'll be on view. They have such a rich collection that it was a lot of fun to go through and kind of choose what I wanted to highlight.
Dan, some would say that the time of the Depression is, depressing. But this is a story that you both were drawn to and wanted to tell through your collecting, and now you're displaying. So what was it that led you to that?
Well, I think that as historians, we're both believers in history repeats itself. And the question is, do we ever learn anything from that? Do we pay attention to it? As Kate mentioned, there's some great pictures of the Dust Bowl. Well, the Dust Bowl, if you will, in the 30s was probably a mini climate change event. It affected just, the United States, but it was something that was devastating to the people who had to live through it. And they had to live through it, survive it, and they also had to take certain measures to fix that situation, which they did. So Susan and I kind of look at things like that and say, well, is anybody paying attention to that? We have climate change today. Are we, trying to work on those kind of things? I think the other big thing, too, was just the economy and how volatile the economy has become today. With 24 months ago, we had over 10% unemployment. Today, we virtually have no unemployment. 24 months ago, the stock market was down in excess of 10%. When you look back at the Depression, the stock market crashed and it was down probably 40 or 50%, and we had up to 25% unemployment. Are people paying attention to that? Are we looking at some of the lessons that hopefully we learned during that time and applying them to what goes on today? I know that's kind of a sweet spot for Susan.
Well, the fact that everything is cyclical. If you look at history, it's always cyclical. And so you think of unemployment, and today we have almost none, as Dan said, but then you look at climate change. It's just a matter of time before these cycles repeat themselves.
We always say, those who don't learn from history repeat it. But this is, of course, a way to learn that is through art that is unique. At what point did you look around at your collection and go, oh my gosh, we have enough to do an exhibit for someone?
I don't think we have enough.
I would disagree with that.
How many? So Kate says we're displaying 59 pieces at the Cedar Rapids Museum. What percentage of that is of your collection, generally?
It's probably 25 or 30%.
Okay.
So, and I mean, we do have other pieces. Most of the collection revolves around the same subject, but we have some other outlier type of pieces that we have. But this is the portion that we will loan out to museums like the Cedar Rapids Museum. When I used to come to Cedar Rapids and work, sometimes on my lunchtime, I would come over to the museum and look at their most current exhibit. Or if I was here on a Thursday night, one of their nights when they were open late, after I had supper, I would come over and look at their exhibit too. So I was aware of the museum. Kate was receptive when I called to talk to them, because we did talk to other museums throughout the area, and we just felt that the Cedar Rapids Museum, Cedar Rapids, the town and the city, also was a good venue for this event.
Well, during the 30s, this was a place that had a lot of factories. And, there are still people around who will remember those days when this is very much an industrial town. Kate, we talked about the educational aspects of this, that it is as much a history lesson as it is an art exhibit. Are you doing any programming associated with it that's to take advantage of that?
Yeah, we have a lecture series planned, partnering with organizations to talk about climate change and food insecurity, some issues that we can't get up into in most of our exhibitions. So it's really exciting for us. So check that out online. We have all of those listed, but it'll definitely be a really fun and didactic experience.
Work and Society in the 1930s is the name of the exhibit. Dan and Susan's collection will be up through the summer into September.
Yep.
You said, at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art, and the lecture series as well. Well, Dan and Susan, this is fascinating to have heard about how you've worked to build this collection over the years, and thank you so much for sharing it with all of us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We're very pleased to be here in Cedar Rapids.
And before we go, I also have to say to Kate, so some of our listeners and viewers may know that Kate is leaving the museum and moving away. So you've been one of our most regular and favorite guests here on the Culture Crawl.
I'm going to miss it so much. It's been wonderful.
So tell me where you're headed.
My husband and I are moving to St. Louis.
Oh, okay. Well, there are few ways to get into trouble in St. Louis.
I've heard, yeah. I look forward to finding them all.
Well, you'll be greatly missed, and I hope our paths do cross again in the future.
I agree. It's been great.
Yeah. So, again, the exhibit is Work and Society in the 1930s. Dan and Susan's collection on view at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. Thank you again, all, for being here.
Thank you.
You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio many weekdays at 10:30, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture, or your favorite podcast player. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.